Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the NN Journal's second election hustings. This week we are with candidates from West Northamptonshire. Thank you to everyone for joining. It's good to see so many people online with us, and thank you to people that have submitted a question over the last few days. We're going to get through as many of those as possible tonight. How it will work is that each candidate will be asked the same question, and will have 2 minutes to respond to that question. Sarah will remind them towards the end of their time just to let them know that they haven't got long left. And we are hoping to have about 10 minutes at the end of the session where we can get to questions that have come in during the event. So if you have something to ask or a comment to make, just do so in the little Q&A box and we'll try our best to get to that before the end. The candidates on the panel tonight, we have Jonathan Nunn from the Conservative Party, Danielle Stone from Labour, Andrew Simpson from the Liberal Democrats, Steve Miller from the Greens, Peter Rawlinson, an independent candidate, and Harrison Cairns from the Trade Union and Socialist Coalition. Thank you so much for everyone joining us this evening. I know you're all very busy with campaigning. Just a week to go now, or just over, till the election next Thursday. And before we get to the questions, could you each just give us a brief introduction to yourselves, please? Perhaps, Jonathan, we could start with you.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, good evening, everybody. Delighted to be with you. I'm Jonathan Nunn. I've been involved in community stuff for a while, 20 odd years as a parish councillor. 2011, I was very fortunate enough to be elected to the Borough Council. Spent quite a bit of time as a backbencher, and then Mary Markham kindly made me her deputy. Many of you remember Mary. At the point that she decided to resign, I took the job on, and that's what I seem to have done since. Believe it or not, 4.5 years. I don't think that's what the clever money was on, but there we go. And during that time, I've been very proud of, I think, what we've been able to do at the borough. We've had to bring a lot of openness and transparency to it. We've been able to get on with a few things for the town and our communities across the town. Thank you. Thank you very much, Natalie.
Thank you, Jonathan. Danielle?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Danielle Stone. I'm the councillor for Castle Ward in the middle of town, very, very complex area. I'm delighted to be the councillor there. I've been the leader of the Labour group for quite a long time now. I think it's about 6 years, and I'm delighted to have been elected into that position as well. I'm looking forward to the elections on Thursday week, tomorrow week. About time we had a fresh mandate for the work that we do. The elections are way overdue, so I'm really looking forward to see what the result is. Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle. Andrew?
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Andrew Simpson. I'm one of the candidates for Bornston and Crick at these elections. I'm a former Northampton Borough Councillor. I was a Borough Councillor in Northampton for 16 years, and I was part of the team of Lib Dems who took control of the council in 2007. And it feels a little bit like deja vu, because at that point in 2007, Northampton Borough was under government intervention and government control because it was performing so badly. And the team we put in turned the council around and put it back on its feet and got it working properly again. Unfortunately, something called the coalition impacted us very badly at the next set of elections in 2011, and after 16 years I lost my seat. After a few life changes, I've moved into rural Northamptonshire, out of the urban Northampton, and live in Kilsby, and I'm standing for this area. I keep trying to step back from politics, but I always seem to get dragged back into doing things, and here I am again, and trying to do stuff for the local community, which I love doing. So that's just as well, really. So hello, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Steve, please.
Hi everybody, I'm Steve Miller. I've been a Northampton resident for most of my life. I grew up watching the Cobblers on the hotel end, and I'm looking forward to the county ground welcoming spectators again, so I can watch some cricket again this summer. I live in Kingsthorpe with my wife and 2 sons, both of whom go to local schools. And I started standing for the Green Party at elections in Northampton in 2015 and campaigning around them because I wanted voters across Northamptonshire and in Northampton to have an opportunity to vote for a party who put green issues at the centre of their campaign, who recognised that climate change is real, and who wanted councillors that would take positive actions to do something about it at a local level. And we're hopeful, it's 2021 now, so 6 years later, we're hopeful that this time we might actually get to see some Green councillors elected in Northamptonshire.
Great, thank you, Steve. Harrison?
Hi, so my name's Harrison. I'm of course standing on the Task platform, Trade Unionists and Socialist Coalition. I've recently moved into Northampton, but I've always lived in Northamptonshire my whole life, so I've seen over the years austerity measures, how it's sort of affected local communities, you know, our high streets, sort of pushed businesses out of the areas. You know, jobs have sort of slowly become more sparse, and I think I've more recently I've sort of become a bit more sort of passionate and active. You know, taking a role in activism for, say, the NHS, pay rises, against the Kill the Bill, the Black Lives Matter movements, as well as campaigning for Green Core with the you know, sort of behaviour that the bosses had with the staff there, blaming them for COVID outbreaks despite not providing suitable ventilation and PPE. So yeah, so I sort of think, you know, we definitely need a new sort of platform that's actually going to represent the working class people. Yeah, so that's really my spiel.
That's great. Thanks, Harrison. And Peter?
Thank you. I'm Peter Rawlinson. I'm standing as one of the 3 independent candidates in Brackley. I've been a councillor for 10 years and was the Cabinet Member for Finance at South Northamptonshire Council until I resigned the Conservative Party whip in March over issues I had with what I felt was a rather undemocratic constitution of the new West Northamptonshire Council. But I'm really proud to have served South Northamptonshire, and I believe I've left the council in a really good position with good reserves and certainly well-run services.
That's great, thank you. So all the questions asked this evening have come in from NN Journal readers. So the first of the questions is, what will you do to engage local communities in developing and implementing your climate action plan? Danielle, could you start, please?
Thank you. What we've pledged to do on this really most important of all the issues is to look at civic participation and participatory democracy. So what we want to do is set up a citizens' assembly so that people who want to be involved in decision making around this emergency are fully engaged. We want to engage the experts so that we know exactly what we're looking at and what is possible and what isn't possible. We want to develop a strategy as quickly as we can involving all our services, where each service takes their own responsibility for reducing pollution, reducing the carbon footprint, and creating a healthier environment. So we want to do it as democratically as possible, and I think that's the only way to do it. So if we look at what's happened recently in Northamptonshire, cycle lanes, bus lanes, and scooters, all of these are really, really important things. I will champion all of that. Done so badly, wasted all the money that was put into it because it wasn't properly consulted on and the public weren't properly engaged. We don't want to do that. We want to do things with people, but we know it's urgent and we want to do it as quickly as we can.
Thanks, Danielle. Steve?
Thanks, Natalie. I think the first thing to acknowledge is how important it is that all of the councils have accepted that the climate emergency is real, that they need to take steps. And, you know, I'm not going to be the only person who's been getting leaflets through our door from every single party that mentions green issues right at the front of the leaflet. So it's good to see that every party is accepting how relevant it is. And I think credit is due to campaign groups and activists over the last couple of years, such as XR and other local groups who've helped to make this shift and make it such an accepted part of the agenda. I think taking actual action, I think that's a much more significant step. And we need to see real action taken to understand what should be done. And sure, as Daniel said, we need to make sure it's not politicians telling the public what they should do. It's council shouldn't be about doing stuff to people. It should be about doing stuff with the people. If you look at the Wombles, for instance, it's hundreds of people locally who've got fed up with the lack of action around litter and have just taken matters into their own hands. And that's how you get people on board, by doing stuff with the people. So yeah, any Green councillors that are elected to West Northamptonshire Council will from day one be pushing for a citizens' assembly, a representative independent citizens' assembly formed across all and all areas of the county to help formulate the actions that we need to take. You know, it's the most important issue that's facing us at the moment. And I think it'd be wonderful if in 4 years' time, we can look back at the actions that West Northamptonshire has taken and see that actually, you know, we're a leader in this area, rather than, as Danielle said, an example of a council that's kind of making it up as we go along. So that's what we do if Green councillors are elected on 6th of May.
Great, thank you, Steve. Jonathan.
Thanks, Natalie. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree so far. I mean, look, first of all, we do have to take people with us, and there's one reason for that, because the council's own, any council's own carbon is minor. It's everybody's carbon, isn't it? And so we've got to instill that desire and those habits in everybody. We have come quite a way in Northampton. There is a significant reduction if you go back to 2005 on carbon, but of course a lot of that's just due to changes in technology. If you like, a lot of it is perhaps sort of accidental. What we've really got to do now is push. I think our track record in Northampton is one in which we've done a lot of consultation. We got 9,000 responses to one that we did on waste services. We've done a lot of consultation on the town centre regeneration. And I have a personal view, you get a better decision if you involve more people and you're more likely to take them along with you. We have had a climate forum group who have produced a carbon strategy, which was adopted at NBC. We're now in the West. Our determination is to see that continue into the West, because I think it was pretty ambitious and it had the involvement of a lot of other groups and indeed a lot of other parties. So I'd want to see that continue. And then of course at the lower end, you've got to work with initiatives. So we planted trees with Street Trees Northampton and various small groups like this. I think you've got to have the bold strategy, and then you've got to instill it all the way down into some local initiatives. But without doubt, it is one of the biggest. It is the biggest priority, I think, that faces this council. So a Conservative council would put huge resources and energy into this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Harrison, please.
Yeah, I mean, agreeing with the fellow councillors so far, like engaging with our local communities, with our wards, you know, is utmost there. You know, speaking to the community groups, campaigners about their needs, their worries, you know, their concerns. But I also do think that, you know, we shouldn't be putting anything down to them. We should be the ones taking the lead. And you know, just a couple of points I think of straight away is, you know, currently we've only got Stagecoach as the only form of local transport around. You know, they're big diesel buses. You know, if you look at Cambridge, you look up north in places like Hull, they've got green sort of hybrid alternative transport, which are, you know, affordable for the working class people, for students, and this is a perfect way to create this alternative, a competition for companies like Stagecoach to actually up their game, to bring in cleaner, greener vehicles. And then same with the cycle lanes. You know, some of these roads, I've tried to cycle to work every now and then, and some of those roads in the mornings, you know, sort of a bit like a white knuckle ride. So, you know, I do think these are really key points, and, you know, trying to make these, let's say, things like cycle lanes, public transport, a lot more affordable, a lot more accepting. You know, it's so many of us have to drive to work. So, you know, if you've got buses that gets around, or we've got cycle lanes that take us out to these workplaces that are safe, that are reliable, then, you know, that's a key ideal sort of first place to start, I think. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Harrison. Andrew.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is the most important issue, and it's great that it's the first question. I don't want to break the consensus, but I feel frustrated that things are taking too long. You've seen the County Council have a scrutiny committee that's done a report and task and finish. We've had our own one locally in Daventry District Council that's come out with a number of recommendations, and yet we don't seem to be getting many actions actually taking place. And I think what I'd like to see the new council do is firstly lead by example. And I think it should set a 100-day action plan, so that every 100 days we can go back and say, what have we changed in the last 100 days that is helping tackle the climate emergency? And I think if the council can do that and lead by example, that will bring other people along as well, because otherwise it has sometimes seemed a bit of a talking shop where we have lots of groups getting together, but actually, are we actually getting some stuff done? But it must also be from the grassroots upwards. It mustn't be something imposed downwards. I think there's been mention of some really good initiatives that have been badly implemented and not really brought people on side when they've been introduced. We've got to bring people with us and recognise that it's different for different areas as well. You know, the rural community will have different requirements and different things that it can do than the urban community. And some parish councils I know have already got climate emergency plans and are trying to implement those. Some parish councils haven't. Some of the town councils will be further ahead, some not so. So again, the council can show leadership in helping each community come up with its own plan to tackle the climate emergency in its area. And then the council can hopefully facilitate things like electric charging points for electric vehicles in every community. You know, we've got to make sure they're accessible for the future everywhere. So let's work now to find out where they can be. And I think I agree with Harrison's point, particularly the roads and the safety for cyclists and pedestrians. You know, we've got to start tackling that because we want people to be using alternative forms of transport. We don't want reliance on the motor vehicle. We've got to have be promoting cycling and walking, and that means that the roads and pavements and the cycleways are there and they're safe for people to use. And again, the council can lead on that and work with each community to identify where actions can improve access and people being able to get out their cars and walk to the next village or walk into town rather than feeling they have to use their car to do that. Restoring bus services that have been so decimated under the county council's cuts. You know, we need to start reconnecting communities with public transport. There are villages that are isolated. I called on a lady only the other day, and she's you know, she hadn't got a car, she couldn't drive, the shop's closed in her village, and there's no bus service. She feels isolated. We've got to start reconnecting those communities and making sure it's not just the car that is the only alternative for people to use. There's an awful lot to do. I do think, and I do support a citizens' assembly or a forum, and Lib Dems would want to do that. We want to bring all the various interest groups together. And
We've got 20 seconds.
And I think it would be good if that was actually driven by some of those interest groups rather than the council itself, but the council should facilitate that to happen so that we are bringing everybody on side, because climate change is the responsibility of every community.
Brilliant, thank you, Andrew. And Peter?
Thank you. I mean, I think there's a lot that is beginning to happen now, which will have a beneficial effect. You know, we're looking at ramping up charging points across the area. New homes are being built to the highest environmental standards with included charging points. We were certainly looking at other forest areas we can create, or perhaps even microforests. And you know, certainly in South Northamptonshire, we had a very good recycling rate. We were ranked, from the last figures I found, 12th in England, the 12th best. So, you know, there has been a lot of good work. Yes, certainly there is a lot more that we can bring together, both as councillors interacting with our residents and our parish councils, to share best practice and nudge people to do the right things. You know, and certainly I agree with the comments on buses. The way things seem to have worked in the past is that when developers build a new development, they provide money for buses. That starts off when there are very few residents there. By the time the area is fully populated, the money has run out, and they say, you know, not enough people are using them, and we lose the service. So I think we need a really new look at that to connect our towns together, and quite agree with Andrew on, you know, the number of people who are in rural isolation and can't get out is something that we need to really tackle quickly.
Great, thank you, Peter. So the next question on a similar theme: what action will you take to make sure our children are not breathing dirty air? So a focus on a green issue again, but with the emphasis on the impact on children. Andrew, could you go first, please?
Yeah, thank you. That's really good question, actually, because obviously we've just seen earlier this year with a tragic case of Ella Adu Kisi Deborah, I have to check her name, who obviously died in 2013, but this year it was agreed that it was down to air pollution, and it's the first case that's happened in this country. And yet, depending on which figures you look at, we're ranging from up to 40,000 people a year they reckon could be dying because of air pollution, and our record as a nation hasn't been great at dealing with this. So I think there's two aspects for us in terms of what we would do as Lib Dems. Locally, actually identifying where we've got the problems seems to be quite difficult. I was looking for my own patch in Vaughan and Crick. In Crick, we've got the M1, junction 18, lots of heavy lorries all the time. It has been identified as a potential area for poor air quality, but being able to find out exactly what the latest measurements are is difficult for a member of the public. Daventry District Council is supposed to be responsible, I believe, for monitoring it and reporting on it. The last I could find on their website was dated 2017. That's not good enough. We're not giving people the information they need in the starting point to find out how difficult or widespread the problem is. So again, the council needs to lead and be able to provide that information and make sure it's being provided. I know some local parish councils started taking matters into their own hands. One of my local parish councils has bought some equipment to monitor itself. That's great, and I think that's good, and we should encourage that. But not everybody has the same means to be able to buy their own equipment. And again, the council should be facilitating that. And once we know the problems are, then we can take action to reduce it. So obviously, if I can find out what the problem is in Crick, then we can start to see what can we do to try and tackle that issue. Can we do anything to reduce the car use in that area? On a national level, briefly, the Lib Dems have signed up to Ella's law, which is to make sure that the UK government signs up to WHO guidelines on particulate matter. Since we've left the EU, we're not governed by any regulation, it seems, at the moment, and the Environment Bill has been stalling in Parliament. So there is a gap in our UK laws, and we need to bring those back in line.
Thank you, Andrew. Steve.
Thanks, Natalie. Yeah, this is absolutely, Andrew's right, this is a really important question. And I just wanted to touch on one of the things he said earlier, which was about the lack of action. And as Jonathan will know, Northampton Borough Council does have a low emission strategy, which I contributed to on behalf of the Green Party. And one of the recommendations of that low emission strategy was that the air quality management areas that exist in Northampton Town Centre were going to be widened, and it was going to become a town-wide air quality management area, which would be, with the air quality action plan, would actually give the council legal weight to consider air quality as part of planning. That is several years overdue now. And, I know there's probably reasons for it, but I've been pushing the council about getting that actually passed so that we can actually start to consider air quality in planning decisions and actually make the developers have to take that into account when they're building new developments. So I just wanted to quickly mention that. But air quality with regards to children, absolutely, it's something I'm passionate about. I cycle to school every morning with my 8-year-old son. I know it's the right thing to do, but it's also one of the scariest things that we do because our roads are absolutely governed by the motor car, and that needs to change. So what would Green councillors do? Well, we think that every school that wants one would have the rights to set up a school street. So a school street closes the road outside the school to traffic for a few hours each day at school pickup and drop off time. There's been one pilot scheme of this in the county, and I know some of the hoops that school had to go through to make that happen. So I think West Northampton Council should adopt a position whereby schools can be offered that opportunity, and the council works with the school to make it happen rather than being obstructive. I think roads in urban areas should have a speed limit of 20 miles per hour. I know that many roads around schools are set to 20, but we need to widen that. I don't think cars should be doing 30 miles an hour along the roads where people live and where children play. We'd make that a priority. There's a reason why people say 20 is plenty. And finally, I think Green Party councillors would make low traffic neighbourhoods a priority. So as we've already touched on last year, the government did make funding available to favour schemes that enabled cycling and walking. And apart from a couple of half-hearted cycle lanes, our county council didn't grasp this. And I know that there's been frustrations between possibly the boroughs and the districts and the county council about actually implementing that. So I think we should look at the government standards for cycle lanes and work towards a plan that enables those across the town, so that when we are trying to solve problems about congestion and air quality, instead of the default position being let's build another road, the default position is let's see if we can get more people on bicycles. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Steve. Jonathan.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, just a quick word on that, really. Some of the recent stuff that's happened has been a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction by the government saying, look, there's much less traffic because of COVID. Quickly, what can we do to get people cycling more? And the sad thing is the public response has not been great either, frankly, which is really disappointing. And that says that we've got a journey to take people on, haven't it? And some of this is about communication. And so the thing that Steve's talked about through the Northampton Climate Change Forum has come up with a report that's got 32 actions. What we're doing about in terms of getting people involved is a manifesto pledge. We said we will have a formal summit, if you like, to get everybody across the West together really quick, not something forever in the distance, but really, really quick to get the momentum behind that work and pick up the threads on those 32 actions. Planning also, as Steve mentioned, is a key part. So some of it is about residential developments, including charging points and so on. It's about the inclusion of trees and open space, and it's about the location. Sometimes when we think particularly of children, as this question points us towards, of course, and many points have been made already, we often think about schools. Schools are really important, of course, and I like the idea of some of the concepts of closing traffic around schools, perhaps for certain hours during the day. But I know that at Kingsthorpe Grove, again, this is Steve's part of the town, really, so he'll know, I believe there was monitoring there. It was less about perhaps the danger of being exposed at school. It was more about the danger of where you are at home and sleeping 8 hours. And so, for example, planning had stopped a residential development at the Cock Hotel development because that does have an air quality problem. I think the issue is we've got to get on with all of these points, all of these actions really, really quickly. But there is also something, as well as fast actions, there is something about a proper strategy, because as yet, whilst clearly everybody on the screen does have a passion, and we know there is a strong body of enthusiasm towards green issues, I hear that from people every day, encouraged. We've also got other population to take with us. There is a message still to get out there that I'm not sure everybody's yet bought. And once we get that, I think we'll see an acceleration in the support that we're getting to bring the carbon down and get the air clean. Thank you.
Thank you. Harrison.
Yeah, well, to be honest, it's kind of one of those difficult things because, to be honest, like as John was saying, not everyone has kind of been on board with these policy procedures that we kind of push in, or try and get people to come on board with. But to be honest, a lot of people don't have the choice. If you're working out of town and you're a low-income family, you need to drive. Even if it's you try to car share. So it would be great to be able to provide alternatives for people. It would be great to be able to say close roads outside schools. But once again, it depends on whether these areas are in, say, roads people do need to take to get to work. And I think a key point that we could be doing is bringing things in-house, providing local jobs, so people don't have to travel so far. People don't have to travel out of areas to commute so far. I was just thinking about some of the sort of local parks. If we actually had in-house, council jobs for greenkeepers, for people passionate about that sort of work. I used to live in Kettering, and they've got a fantastic grounds team there who are, say, council members. They look after their gardens, they look after the verges, and they're really passionate about what they do. I think that's straight away. Just you're planting, you've got the right sort of people in that sort of position, creating these, say, carbon traps, basically, with when you come to planting trees, creating good variety in these ecosystems, creating homes, forage sites for wildlife. All of it is is lovely. It creates a nice sort of diverse ecosystem.
20 seconds.
But once again, I said, if we're also looking at, say, sort of alternative transport for people that we can run that we lead and we set its it's a the limit on what sort of pollution it can be given off, and so we're in control. That's, I think, where we need to be, and we're setting the bar, and with that people can then sort of chip in and help out where they can.
Thanks, Harrison. Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we do have to recognise, certainly in the wilds of South Northamptonshire, down the southwest end, that we are commuter communities with people travelling to Milton Keynes, Northampton, Oxford, wherever. And yes, there are some real hotspots. Obviously, the A5 through Towcester has been something that has been measured for a long time. There is a bypass going there, which will certainly help. It may not be the answer, but that and the Farthing-How bypass are examples where we can actually move the major traffic flows away from areas of residential concentration. And I think certainly we have an opportunity as perhaps people come back to, rather than working elsewhere, work at home and in the office, a hybrid working model, which will actually be a great opportunity for our local centres, where people, rather than have recreation where they work, if they are still in their home area, they can actually make more use of the local pubs and restaurants in their own area, which will reduce the need to travel. So, I think there could be some real opportunities there for taking traffic off the road and supporting our local businesses.
Thank you. Danielle.
Thank you. Well, I'm a great believer in the people who are the most affected being encouraged into action. So there was a brilliant scheme, I think it was in Westminster, called Pupil Power, where the school did a lot of work with the pupils, finding out all the data around air pollution and how it was affecting the pupils. And the pupils developed that as a campaign with their parents. And in the end, they stopped cars. Families opted to stop driving into the school or near to the school, and they left what they called a safe zone around the school. And I think, this is a really urgent issue. When I go and talk to school councils or groups of young people in schools, and I ask them, if there's one issue you want me to take up for you, what is it? They nearly always say air pollution. And I think they know how serious it is, because it's their health that's being so badly affected. And we know that disadvantaged communities are impacted disproportionately by bad air quality. So poor families, BAME families, the research shows, are disproportionately affected because they live closer to where the traffic flows are. And it is extraordinary to me that some drivers still think it's okay to sit in a car that's idling. I walked from my house past my local school yesterday, and there were 6 cars idling. Well, that is pumping out pollution right into the faces of their own children. And so it seems to me that we need to do a big educational job there, and give people the information and help them understand how damaging that is to their own children, as well as to the environment in general. And of course, one of the things that I get really frightened about, I have to say, is we do air quality testing outside, but buildings are permeable. And we need to understand how air pollution affects children in school. We need to understand how it affects them in their own houses. We need to understand that so that we can put in proper mitigations. I've got lots of family who live in Germany, and when I go to Germany, it's very striking to me that the biggest area of pollution, the autobahns, the motorways.
20 seconds.
In Germany, they mitigate against that by putting up wooden barriers that absorb sound and pollution, and they plant trees that absorb pollution and pump out oxygen. We don't do that. So in West Northampton, we've got the M1. We need to do something about it because it's a heavy pollutant.
Great, thank you, Danielle. The next question that's come in says, there are differing levels of poverty and inequality of provision experienced by constituents. How will you ensure that poverty is alleviated and wealth and resources are appropriately distributed across West Northampton by the new unitary council? Jonathan, could you start, please?
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. Happy to. This one is really, really important, and there is no doubt that it is at differing levels. We, and as a Northampton councillor, we're sort of aware of perhaps what the picture is, but we know that picture in Northampton has changed dramatically, and certainly would across other areas. Sometimes parts of the new area that I've lived in before, but you know, we're not so familiar in recent years. The rural areas, in many ways, it's more hidden. There are equally poverty problems out there, and more mixed and more hidden than perhaps we might know in those areas we're familiar with in Northampton. I think that in addition to which, of course, COVID, we'll see, you know, as furlough becomes a distant memory, we'll see people in more and more trouble. There'll be all sorts of issues. I firmly believe in some of the stuff I've read that actually online gambling, while people have been at home, there are more and more people who got involved in online gambling. So the nature and the extent of these poverty problems are going to be huge. We've committed to do something in the West. It came as a result of motions that first came to NBC, mainly driven by Labour group colleagues. I was glad to support, and so were others. And what that is a commitment to a poverty strategy. They don't read the word as being something strategy. It's going to take a long time. This needs to happen really, really quick. We need to quickly identify what the scale of the problems are, what the new post-COVID problems are, and we need to get on with solving them. Now, quite what those solutions will be, we don't know. We do know that we have the most incredible generosity of many people across the community, but probably we've never woken up before in the same way, because COVID has done that, and we know we're going to have greater need. Some of those solutions there, therefore, might be more about community solutions and facilitating community solutions rather than shoveling millions of pounds out the door, which might just not be available. But nevertheless, also leaving the individuals themselves not just helplessly at the end of receiving, but having some decision making and some impact on their own, on their own futures. So I think that's an important part of it. As a council, we've encouraged the new council to sign up to sort of 3 conversations model, where they identify with an individual what the problem is. They deal with the crisis part, and that's the first bit we're going to have to deal with urgently coming out of COVID, is the crisis. But then we've got to look longer term as well to find more longer term solutions. And that's going to need a lot of information. There's a lot of information on deprivation already held that will need updating. Also, there's a census just taking place. That information will be more available in about a year's time. But I think we've got that initial identify, we've got the urgent crisis bit, then we've got to find a way of absolutely, if not eradicating, vastly reducing poverty for the future in the West as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Peter.
Right, thank you. I think whilst in general, certainly some of the rural areas in West Northamptonshire are some of the least deprived areas in the country. If you actually go and look in more detail, you certainly find that there are pockets that are actually in the lowest 10%. So as Jonathan said, these areas do exist across the county, and it is certainly something that we need to be aware of and need to make sure is addressed. And I've been very vocal in fighting to lower the council tax reduction scheme to a reasonable level, where those in most need will only pay a proportion of their council tax. I think 20% that the council has already adopted is not enough of a reduction. We had an 8.5% level in South Northamptonshire. But the one thing I do find good is that there is a hardship fund, has been established by the Shadow Council, So for those that are really been hit by that huge increase, there will be some sort of safety net to help people. So I think we need to be aware of it. We need to make sure that there are appropriate mechanisms behind the scenes to support those who, through no fault of their own, are struggling, and do everything we can to support it.
Thank you. Danielle.
Okay, question very close to my heart. People are getting poorer, more people are getting poor, more people are working for their poverty. These are structural issues, and our anti-poverty strategy in West Northampton need to address all of those issues. So what needs to happen? People need more money in their pocket, don't they? They need cheaper services. They need access to activities closer to home. And all of that, again, feeds into the green agenda, it seems to me. But crucially, we need people with money in their pockets. How are we going to do that? We've been championing for a long time now the notion of employers being living wage foundation employers. The Living Wage Foundation works out how much money people need to earn to stop the need for them to go to food banks, frankly. And that needs to happen across West Northampton. It means that all our contracts need only to go to people who are going to be Living Wage Foundation employers, so that we can stop people going into poverty. But we also need to look at how we reduce people's bills. We're in favour of having a big energy switch, so that we find a green energy supplier that we can all sign up to, because the volume will then bring down costs. And I think we need to all the time be looking to see how we can reduce costs that people are having to pay out in their weekly, monthly, annual bills. And we need to do it very quickly, it seems to me. There's lots and lots of other things that need to happen too. We need to work on government. If they're going to introduce a benefit cap, they ought to introduce a rent cap. I think that is grossly unfair. You've got one and not the other. How is that logical? We need to have a view of what kind of jobs we can encourage into West Northampton. We're a very low wage economy. Low wage economies depress expectations. They depress education results. Actually, there is a correlation. In Castle, in the ward that I represent, it is one of the most disadvantaged in the country. And I can confirm what that police officer said the other day, that poverty breeds crime. It makes my community very vulnerable to grooming by criminal gangs. Criminal gangs move in where people are poor and disadvantaged and vulnerable. And that is something that we're seeing quite a lot of in Northampton. 40 county lines operating in Northampton. It is not an accident. It's because our communities have become more and more impoverished, and we need to take action to stop that happening.
Thanks, Danielle. Harrison.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I think poverty is an issue of capitalism. It's something that is put in place by the bosses, by corporate owners, setting wages as low as legislation allows. And as all the candidates of Tusk, we are advocates for trade union membership. Even one of our candidates, Dimitri Manole, who is standing in the St George ward, he's the union rep at Greencorn, did a fantastic job for the workers there. And with trade unions, you can use collective bargaining to challenge employers for fair pay and benefits. Even in our demands, we actually call to campaign for the introduction of a living wage above the minimum wage. Because even this minimum wage, it's still pushing. I actually live in Castle Ward as well, and I don't think I could rent one of these houses myself. I don't make enough. I'm renting with housemates because of it. So I do think this poverty is a massive issue. It causes people to go into slumps. It's so hard to dig yourself out of these slumps. And I think when people are in these positions, I think especially through lockdown, we've, people are going to look for alternative solutions. They're going to look for ways to cope. And to be honest, if you can walk down the street and either get drugs or, hang out with someone who's maybe pulls into something a bit nasty, or, gamble online, it's a way to cope. And, so what I think we need to be doing is, say, building communities, having these communities talking to each other. I used to, live in a small village where you spoke over the wall to your neighbours, and it was lovely. And, there was always that support there, and, you never felt that sort of issues. And so I do think, that is a very sort of a key part, is, creating these communities, and also, helping people challenge their bosses, against, these what is quite appalling pay. And additionally, so with council houses as well, actually, I think, we
20 seconds.
a lot of these houses are privately owned, so you're renting off private landlords, and they can, once again, they're setting their rents at whatever stage that they feel like they can get away with. So building council houses, eco-friendly council houses at affordable rates for working class people, I think is definitely a way to go forward.
Thank you, that's great. Andrew, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, how is it that we're in the 21st century and yet we're getting the gap between the richer and poor is getting bigger, and even more so in the pandemic? And we've seen, we're going to see it get even bigger when the furlough schemes start to end, and if the government does go ahead and cut universal credit, the uplift that it brought in. And the other thing that gets me very angry is I don't know when food banks became acceptable. When did food banks become acceptable in this country? Food banks are a sign of failure of all of us politicians. We should be working to make sure that not one single person has to rely on a food bank. That's just something that I can't understand how that is accepted by anybody, to be honest with you. But how do we do that? I think Daniel's picked up on a lot of really points that I would agree with in terms of living wage and making sure people have enough money to live on. And the Lib Dems are supporting the universal basic income concept to try and take people out of that poverty gap and to take them out of not having to rely on food banks. From the council's point of view, there are three areas I think the council needs to lead on again in this area. One is jobs, making sure we have got good quality jobs, working with the university to make sure we've got training and support in the colleges, trying to encourage companies here by making sure there's business improvement districts and we're bringing in industry with high quality jobs, not just low pay jobs. Making sure everybody has a secure home. I think Harrison was touching on that in terms of council housing and social housing. The council can obviously direct development, it can specify and make sure that enough affordable housing is built for people, and it can also support people with rent deposit schemes and rent to buy schemes, and it should be doing that to make sure that young people, all people, have a chance to have their own home. And the last thing, the third area that the council needs to be leading on is making sure people have access to the benefits when they need them. It's very confusing. There are so many agencies. One opportunity we have with the new unitary council is at least there's one layer of complication has been taken away by having two councils to deal with. There's now one council. So that's an opportunity to make sure that it's much easier for people to get access benefits and that the communication support and information is clearer, and the council is providing that. The last thing that I think the council should be doing, and I've said, I keep using the word leadership, it needs to lead and campaign, and some of these issues will need to be campaigned with nationally, and it needs to be campaigning, to stop the government ending the extra amount of universal credit, because that's going to be, again, widen the gap between rich and poor. As I say, working a strategy to make sure that we don't have food banks in this country. Those are the sorts of things that the council should be leading on.
Thank you. Steve.
Thanks, Natalie. There's a lot of things that people have said that I agree with. So, Danielle, absolutely spot on about the living wage. Absolutely, that's something that we should be looking at from all the people who are suppliers to the West Northamptonshire Council. Absolutely, 100%. And Andrew, universal basic income, it's been Green Party policy since, I think, it's been official party policy since 2019, but I think it was there before then. If we had Green Party councillors in West Northamptonshire, then we'd start pushing immediately for West Northamptonshire to take part in a universal basic income pilot scheme. As you know, there's councils up and down the country that are saying they'd take part in that, because let's see what difference that can make to people and get them out of the stranglehold of universal credit and the maze of the benefit system, and let's give them a universal basic income and see if that helps. I think one of the things that I do want to mention is that obviously a couple of people have mentioned that, you know, there is still poverty in South Northants, there is still poverty in Daventry, and absolutely we all know that. You know, if you go to those towns, we all know that there are parts of those towns that are not as well off as other parts of those towns, and it's wrong to pigeonhole the rural areas and say, oh, everybody's well off there. We get that, but I think it's also fair to say that the levels of poverty in Northampton, not just in Castle, but there's areas near me that are, you know, in that lower 10% that Danielle mentioned. I know there's other parts of town that also suffer. And I think we should, you know, acknowledge that West Northamptonshire absolutely has to, there can't be a postcode lottery. You know, we've got to address the issues as and when they occur and where they occur, so that people can get the support they need from West Northamptonshire Council when they need it and wherever they live in the county. We can't have a situation where it's easier to get support in Towcester than it is to get support in Northampton. And I think that, you know, there's going to be all parts of the council are going to be siloed for the next couple of years. There's going to be parts of the council that you've got to sort of smush them all together and get them working together. And I think this is one of the most critical things, so that, you know, people who need support know they can get it from their council without having to go through loads of red tape.
Brilliant, thanks, Steve. We're already just 10 minutes or so off from the end, so perhaps we could limit the answers to about 1 minute for this next question. Sorry, I know that's not long, just so that we can try and get through to one of the audience questions as well. So this next one says, if you are elected to serve on West Northamptonshire Council, how would you propose to ensure that there is ongoing support for those libraries that have been removed from the statutory system in this county? Obviously, libraries have been a big issue over the last few years, and the sort of problems at the county council. Harrison, could you start, please?
Yeah, so as a candidate for Tusk, in fact, all our candidates, we will stand against all cuts, but we'll also fight to reinstate these services. You know, services like the libraries actually provide so much more than, you know, just books and places to read. You know, you've got access to computers and printers, which are necessities, sorry, for low-income and deprived households. You know, I know at one point that's, you know, something that I, you know, desperately needed while, you know, looking for work. But additionally, though, these are community hubs. You know, they provide space for, you know, community groups, for parents and babies, you know, meeting each other, and they say events and classes. So these are important hubs, and we will fight, say, cuts. We will ensure that, like, you know, using our reserves, we can get the funding back into these areas.
Great, thank you. Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you. I think so. Obviously, a number of communities have come forward to run these outside of, if you like, council run. They do have a service level agreement with council that's still supported for the books, for the equipment, and so on. But I think the real sustainability and perhaps the role for any of us who are local councillors is in terms of the range of services that are available. A little bit like department stores, there's a changing need, isn't there? And actually, where these are going to be successful, these libraries, where they're starting to do things like have health facilities or clinics in, there's some that have got mother and parent groups, an increased range of services, jobs clubs, those sorts of things. As local councillors, yes, for a library that's on our patch, we've got to fight to make sure, we've got to push to ensure that the council maintains that service level agreement and extends it, and so on. We've also got to get push for the services that people want to go to their libraries for, so that they've got something attractive to draw them in, I think. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Danielle.
What's happened to our libraries is an absolute disgrace. Information and knowledge is power. And I feel really strongly that power has been taken away from working class communities because of what's happened to our libraries. I think our libraries need to be reinvented as community hubs. I feel really strongly about that. I think they need to maintain their role as providers of information and knowledge and books and digital books and access to online activity and all of that. But I think we are seeing an increasing need for community hubs, so very local provision that people can walk to, that engages with all the statutory services and supports the statutory services, because I cannot for the life of me see how West Northampton is going to deliver its statutory duties without having community hubs in localities. And I think libraries have always been part of our democratic tradition, one of the most democratic institutions we've ever developed. And I think we need to exploit them to their full potential. In terms of funding, I would hope that all our libraries are connected to Library Connect, which is a national organisation, and are aware of future funding. And so one of the things that I think needs to happen in West Northampton, all other local authorities, are funding officers who go out into communities to support them identifying their needs and then support them to get the funding to meet some of those needs.
Thanks, Danielle. Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Danielle. It's scandalous what's happened to our libraries, I think, over the last few years. I think the County Council's decision to start chopping libraries as a sort of first port of call when they got a budget squeeze was, it was a drop in the ocean compared to the amount they needed to save. And what does it tell you about the County Council's priorities? And I know, I'm sure Jonathan's not one of those candidates who's campaigning to save libraries locally, but I do think it's extraordinary that Conservative candidates are door knocking and saying, vote for us to save the libraries, when the Conservative County Council is actually the source of all the problems for the libraries over the last few years. One of the things that's happened is that you've kind of got this situation now where we're dependent on volunteer groups and those sort of things to run the libraries, and yet the County Council is charging those volunteer groups 15 grand per year to actually rent the building that they're going to provide them in. So it's almost like volunteer groups are being expected to deliver services that the County Council should be providing as part of its statutory obligations, and also pay the County Council for the privilege of doing it. So yeah, absolutely, these libraries should be given as much support as they can. But I think the first thing the new unitary authority should do is say, you know what, if we've got volunteer groups that are running libraries in our buildings, providing a service that we failed to deliver, we should reduce that rent overhead and stop charging them 15 grand a year for the privilege of doing it, because that could be the difference between a locality having a library and not having a library.
Brilliant, thank you. Peter.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, we really should support our libraries for all the reasons that have been mentioned. And they are vital for our local communities, and not just, as has been said, for books, but all the other community activities that they can be used for, and we should really be developing those opportunities for further use by a variety of local organisations, and make sure that they are kept open, and actually by the number of people using it, demonstrate to West Northamptonshire Council that how useful they are, because I think the figures that they came up with when they were closing libraries showed a very small footfall in certain areas, but I think those figures really masked the great benefit that we can get from our local libraries.
Thank you. And Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, first I'd agree with Steve. I think it was an act of community vandalism when the council threatened the libraries with closure, and clearly didn't understand how they were and are community hubs already, and can be more so if we put the investment and time into them. One of the things I'm worried about with the new council is that it's big and it could get remote. And it needs to be close to the people to be effective and to be relevant and to help people. And that's what the council is about, isn't it? It's about making people's lives better. And to do that, I think we should be using our libraries, both community ones and the ones continue to be run by the council, and making sure that the council services are available from those libraries. It's happened to a degree, but again, the opportunity of having one council rather than split services between different ones means we can do even better. We can make sure all the council services are available through the libraries. They are really a hub of information. And then we can also as a council, encourage and work with other community groups to use those libraries as bases, as locations to get information out, to run events, to run groups, so that they truly are a place of not just getting a book, but learning, meeting people, discovering something new, and getting information. You know, they're precious resources, and we need to make sure that we maintain, enhance, and keep them in our communities.
Thank you, that's great. We'll just squeeze in one last question that's come in during the event. It says, why should we trust any candidate, or sorry, that any candidate will follow through on election promises, especially when there seems to be no consequences when things go wrong? And they give the example of the failed cobbler's loan. Jonathan?
Happy to. Regular discussion point, actually a night and day obsession, if you like. Decisions were taken in 2013 that weren't right. Let's just answer that particularly because, of course, a couple of things have happened with the people involved in the Sixfield loan. One, a High Court judgment, which I took some part in ensuring we got against directors of the football club for a significant amount of money. Another company that was involved, liquidation that we're chasing money out of. Of course, the big thing is going to be the police, who have now referred files to the Crown Prosecution Service. So that's the scenario there, really. Why should we trust? Do you know you have to form a judgment on people, don't you? You listen to what we have to say. I also think, look, frankly, however charming any of us on the screen are, somebody told me the other day, you can't fatten a cow onto the market. Most of us have been around for a while. I've done my job for 4.5 years. I'd ask you to judge on that basis. I believe what we've done at the borough has we've created a far more open and transparent environment in which we involve more people. We're open to scrutiny. We've learned lessons both in terms of the governance that went wrong with us, and indeed, to answer Bob Entwistle's point in the Q&A, a lot of lessons have been learned as to why in Northamptonshire we had some fairly expensive services that weren't delivering for people. There have been significant number of savings made in the last couple of years, which should mean that the new council never falls into that same financial difficulties, even with the challenges that we know we're all going to face, poverty and so on, post-COVID. Thanks,
you.
Natalie.
Do we have time for each candidate to quickly give an answer to that? Yeah, is everyone happy? We'll just be running over by a few minutes, if that's okay. Yeah, Danielle, can you go next?
Well, I think there should be consequences if people bankrupt our local authorities, if they lose nearly £17 million. I think there very definitely should be consequences. And I think politics, you know, I find politics very exciting because I like to think of myself as a change agent. I want to see change for the better for everybody. I want people to tell me what changes they want to see, and I want to work with them to put those changes into place. I think trust in politics is absolutely vital. And I think the only way you can build that trust is working at a very grassroots level and delivering on your promises. So, you know, when people are betrayed by politicians, I just think that reflects really badly on the whole system. And of course, there should be a lot more accountability. What I'm hoping in the new West Northamptonshire Authority is that we learn some of those lessons and that we have really rigorous scrutiny procedures, which are chaired by opposition councillors, not by administration councillors, where we hold people to account for their decisions. And I think all of us need to make a contribution to seeing what the problems are and what possible solutions are on the basis of that grassroots work we're doing out in the community.
Thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, there's a gap here in what code of conduct, really, I think, for local councillors and people being able to stand for elected office. Because if you make yourself personally bankrupt or you're declared personally bankrupt, you can't stand for Parliament and you can't stand for office. But it seems that you can run a council and make that bankrupt and you can stand again for election. So I think there needs to be a change to those regulations on a national level, because I don't think people should be allowed to do that if they've caused the problem themselves. In terms of building trust, that's going to be the biggest challenge for the new council, because the old council, the county council, had such little trust amongst residents. I only went to a meeting yesterday where people were just couldn't believe what had happened and how badly run it had been, and what an impact it had on the local community, and didn't feel they could rely on it at all to do anything to help improve their local patch. And I think Danielle's picked on a lot of that really, and one of our approaches from Lib Dems is it's not going to just be about whoever is the ruling party. It's got to be about all councillors being involved. So if there's a Lib Dem run council, we would want to move back to a more committee-based system. We want to involve all opposition councillors in the decision-making process, make sure that we're fully open to scrutiny and transparency, make sure there's a forward plan published, and if we're doing any changes such as putting up the council tax, we've explained to our residents why we're doing that and where that money is going. Transparency and accountability, it's got to be the way forward.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Andrew's just said, to be honest. You know, my understanding is the West Northamptonshire Council is going to retain the cabinet model of governance, which obviously was one of the flaws with the issues that happened at both Northamptonshire County Council and Northampton Borough Council. There wasn't enough challenge because the power was concentrated into too few and too strong members. So yeah, absolutely, it should be a committee-based system, and it should involve policy and decision making from across the parties. I know that's happened to a degree more recently over the Borough Council, but yeah, I agree that West Northamptonshire should be very careful that it doesn't fall back into those bad ways. With regards, you know, if you elect some Green Party councillors, we'll be there to call the ruling party to account. Will be there to basically conduct scrutiny, as Andrew said. That's what the opposition councillors are there for. They're there to make sure that the party that's actually governing the county is challenged, and that's what we'd be there for, to make sure that those decisions do get the level of scrutiny that they deserve. And yeah, you're right. You know, I've got a leaflet from 2017 where the Conservative Party say that our libraries are the envy of many other councils, and that the level of financial management that the Conservative County Council has put in is second to none. And we all know where we ended up 6 months later. So yeah, you know, let's get politicians that actually tell the truth, and that, you know, as I think Jonathan said, let's hold them up to their records.
Thank you. Peter?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it is constant scrutiny is the responsibility of all councillors, whether they be a part of the administration or not. And certainly the problems of the county council were not just that there were a few strong people in power, but it's a failure of other councillors to spend so long not challenging what was going on that was demonstrably wrong. It really is the you know, councillors need to make sure they attend meetings regularly, they read in detail the documentation, and be able to stand up and challenge. And if we get councillors who are willing to do all those things, then we have a chance to make West Northamptonshire somewhat better than it has been in the past.
Thank you. And Harrison?
Yeah, well, so as of course with the Tusk cabinets, you know, we're all sort of our first time, you know, doing this, running for council, but you know, we're all from sort of working class areas. We've all, you know, experienced these cuts, and you know, seen it from, I guess, like I say, the, you know, the constituents from the streets. You know, I do, as has been was pointed out by Andrew, I do think yeah, transparency is you know, very much key. You know, people have to be able to access, you know, records of where this money's going, you know, even like who agreed that it should be going there, so we can see you know, the accountability of this. You know, I also think that, you know, these investigations, you know, when they occur, they have to be done by independent sources, not someone who's going to be biased in any way. And of course, as a, you know, as the platform of Tusk, you know, we're key to of not basically funding any more of this privatization. You know, we wouldn't be giving taxpayer money to any you know, private firms, some you know, going to some boss's bank for, you know, whatever promise that they, you know, especially if they, you know, if they fail to carry it out. You know, this taxpayers' money is for you know, the local area, it's for our constituents, and you know, it's about improving their lives and our areas.
That's great, thank you. Thank you all so much for being here this evening. Thank you to everyone who's watched and submitted questions. Sorry we didn't get to more of them. Just a quick reminder that if you're not already subscribed to the NN Journal, you can do so at www.nnjournal.co.uk. We'll have lots of coverage of the election next week, so do make sure you sign up before that. And thank you all again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
you.